I've realized that following through on those important things that you say you're going to do can oftentimes feel like this uphill battle. And not just because the task is tough, but oftentimes simply because we get in our own ways. And when I say we get in our own ways, I mean your mind works against you. You see, the mind can conjure up all these crazy thoughts, limiting beliefs, and these self deprecating comments about yourself that ultimately make doing whatever it is you got to do feel impossible. And oftentimes, the smartest people can find logical ways, logical explanations as to why they should procrastinate on a given thing or why they shouldn't do a given thing. Looking back on my own life, I've struggled with this a lot, especially when it comes to starting new routines in the gym or starting new diet plans. I'd go for a few weeks and things would go well. I'd make slow but steady progress, but then all of a sudden, I'd stop. In all those moments within my life where I had self-sabotaged or just stopped doing that important thing that I said I was going to do, in that moment, I couldn't tell you why I did it. But looking back, after years of reflection and inner work and understanding why I do the things I do and why I think the way I think, it's become very clear to me why I did that. So in this video, I'll be discussing why your discipline problem is actually an identity problem, how you can go about doing inner work to understand this within yourself, and the levels of behavior change that anybody can implement within their own life. So let's begin. There's this psychological concept from Robert Dilts, who is an NLP practitioner, and he came up with the idea of logical levels of behavior change. Basically, these are 6 different levels which everybody experiences when trying to make a behavior change within their own life. The first level is purpose. The second level is identity. The third level is beliefs and values. The fourth level is capabilities. The fifth is behavior, and the sixth is environment. As you can see, one's purpose and one's identity are way higher in the list than simply your behaviors or your capabilities or the environment you're within. Because ultimately, these are the highest organizing signals that dictate your behaviors and your thoughts and your beliefs you have on a daily basis. Once you get clear on this higher purpose or your mission and who you are as a person, that inner identity, then everything else tends to fall into place. Or at least you position yourself in a much more favorable way so that things do eventually fall into place, even if they don't do so in a quick timeline that you expect. Now, the problem is that many people don't understand this. They instead rely on their capabilities or their behavior. They rely on their willpower and discipline to push through when things get tough. Even when they are starting a new exercise routine or starting that new diet or starting that new morning routine or that new business or trying whatever new skill to better improve their life. This is why for those people, it only lasts maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe even a few months, because they're not changing who they are at the identity level and they haven't shifted or evolved, you could say, their purpose. As we've talked about in many other videos, willpower and discipline are finite resources. You can have all the skills, all the capabilities, and seemingly have all the willpower to push through, but eventually you will burn out, plain and simple. And this is one of the core reasons why so many people can start that new habit or start that new routine and do well for a while. They can see momentum, but then eventually they'll fall back into their old ways. Which brings me to the next point, which is what I briefly mentioned before, and this is a lack of purpose. You see, we're living in times where many people, especially younger people, simply don't have they don't have a purpose. They don't have this higher mission. They don't have this thing they're working towards because, well, there are many reasons why this is. You could blame social media. You could blame nihilism. You can blame the immediate gratification of the world we're living in. You can blame modern day conveniences. You can blame politicians, economics, geopolitical wars. All these things you could blame, but ultimately, this is the situation. We have a lack of purpose, a lack of meaning crisis within the world. And many people become these empty vessels, just carrying out the same scripts, the same behaviors, the same beliefs as their parents or their teachers or their priests growing up in the church. And rather than creating their own meaning or defining their own values, they just as I said, they take on the beliefs and the thoughts and the behaviors of everybody who came before them. When you don't have a true and authentic purpose, something you're striving towards, then you can't define your authentic identity. Because, as I mentioned before, that top level is your purpose. The next level is your identity. Your identity naturally will fall into line with whatever that purpose is. And once you have an identity, then your beliefs and your thoughts and your behaviors and your values naturally fall into place. The tricky thing is, your identity, my identity, and everybody's identity was formulated before you were even 9 years old. You see, the subconscious mind, which essentially dominates your entire life, as I've talked about in many other videos, this is especially active from birth until about 8 years old. Your brainwaves are in these different states, these delta states, these theta states. And from 2 or 3 years old until about 8 years old, your brain is the most malleable. You're paying attention to all these things. You're learning new skills. You're learning new languages. You're observing what others within the world around you are doing, how they're responding to things, what they say, what they believe in. And because of this, because your subconscious mind is so strong and because it's so active in those early years, all the things you experience essentially shape who you become. So, as I said, by the time you're 8 years old, 9 years old, your identity is mostly formed. Most people stay stuck with that same level of mind. They might be 20 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old, 80 years old, but they still have the same beliefs, the same thought patterns, the same values, the same behavioral patterns as what they did when they were 8 years old, because these are the things that they inherited from their caretakers, from their teachers, from the clergy, from society as a whole. Maybe your parents were amazing. Maybe your teachers were amazing. Maybe your community and your neighbors and everybody around you was amazing and they wanted the best for you. That's cool. But oftentimes, we do tend to carry on those limiting beliefs and negative thinking patterns from the people around us that we saw before we were 8, 9 years old. These are what I like to call subconscious programs. They essentially make up the code within your mind. They're running in the background, dictating, or maybe not dictating, but at least influencing many of the actions and the thinking and the beliefs you have right now. So an example of this would be, let's say as a kid, you grew up in a working class family and you would go to vacations every now and again, or maybe every now and again you'd go to a kind of nice restaurant and maybe your parents would see somebody driving a nice car and they'd say something like, well, we just aren't like those rich people, referring to you and them and your whole family. As a little kid, you don't really have the ability to think logically. So your brain, or your subconscious mind rather, it just absorbs that information and accepts it as the truth, even though you're 8 years old. You haven't had the opportunity to make money or to become of higher status or to achieve these things perhaps your parents didn't. And yet, as I mentioned, you can't logically work through this. So you just accept that as your truth. And while that might seem like a harmless comment, just hearing somebody say, oh yeah, well, we're not like these rich people, that plants a seed. That idea grows roots within your mind and eventually sprouts to be something large. This belief that encapsulates much of your mental space. I like to think of the movie Inception. In that movie, the whole idea is they need to go inside this guy's brain, go inside this guy's subconscious mind rather, plant an idea that is for him to essentially dissolve his father's business. And they're going to go multiple layers down within his mind in order to plant this idea for it to sprout and grow into something big that essentially dictates his entire life. And this is exactly what happens with those experiences you had as a little kid. They became something so much bigger than what they seemingly were at that time. So knowing this, it means that in order to evolve past those beliefs and those thoughts and those behavioral patterns, then you got to communicate with the subconscious mind. You need to investigate it and explore it and reshape all those programs within that mental code that makes up who you are. Carl Jung, who's one of the greatest psychologists of all time, he talked all about this. And in his book, this one right here, actually, the Red Book, he detailed out his process of active imagination, where it's essentially like self-hypnosis or deep meditation, where you're just trying to understand all of the inner workings of your mind. And it takes a lot of patience and a lot of time And it is scary because in doing so, you're investigating parts of yourself you've never consciously understood. But this process here, it's necessary if you want to develop your sense of self, if you want to evolve your mind. There's so much to unpack with Carl Jung's work, and I'll do so in more videos moving forward. But one of the main points I want to drive home is something he famously said. And it's something along the lines of, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Meaning, like, if there are parts of you you don't understand, then your life will be influenced by those parts you don't understand because you haven't taken the time to become aware of them. And you'll just think it's fate or the universe working against you. But no, those are forces inside of you that are a part of you and you need to integrate. Perhaps there's something or even many things within your life that you haven't been able to follow through with. Maybe you think you lack discipline or you lack willpower, and yeah, that could be the case. However, I do believe that one's inability to follow through on something that they really want to do is more of an identity issue. It's more of a purpose and an inner belief issue above anything else, because ultimately your subconscious mind controls so much of your life. And if you don't understand what's going on within it, then, as I said, it'll direct your life and you will call it fate. So I strongly encourage you to spend even 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes every single day in silence and contemplation, in journaling, trying to understand exactly what's going on beneath the surface, because otherwise, nothing changes. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And while many people will go about the same existence for years and decades without really understanding why they do the things that they do, you can become somebody who has that inner awareness, somebody who can develop that awareness, develop that understanding, and integrate it within your own life so that when you take action, you don't feel like there's invisible forces pulling you away. You don't feel like there's something within you or outside of you steering you in another direction, because you have control. You've gained awareness, you've gained an understanding, and with that, you have this calm sense of confident clarity that you didn't have before. So I'll end it here. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like some one-to-one help with this, be sure to apply below to work with me. I do hypnosis, one-on-one stuff, some coaching. So yeah, you could take a look at that, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care.